What if the Jedi were exiled from the Republic long before the Clone Wars? That's our story for today, and it's one that I've been having written down. I've had a thumbnail for it and a story premise for a while. I just didn't exactly know what to do with it, but I think I finally found an idea that I liked. Messes with timelines maybe a little bit, but it's fun, and hope you guys enjoy. So, let's get into it. 100 years ago, the Jedi Order underwent a seismic shift. But before the shift, the Jedi Order spearheaded the creation of Starlight Beacon, a huge space station placed into the darkest, most unknown, dangerous parts of the Outer Rim. This space station served as a hub for trade, exploration, refugees, hospitals, cultural centers, and so much more. However, a rival of the Jedi at this time was a criminal organization called the Nile, and the Nile bombed Starlight Beacon out of orbit. And in this universe, the beacon came crashing down on the heavily populated world of Iram. And despite all of the Jedi's best efforts, the flaming, ginormous beacon would crash into the capital city of this world. Thousands were killed. The exact numbers would never truly be tallied. And this terrifying event was the turning point for the Jedi in the galaxy. Over the next few years, a male Bith called Rugus Gnome would adopt a new strategy to get rid of the Jedi. This Bith was a legendary starship designer known across the galaxy, and he used this reputation to create doubt about the true intentions of the Jedi. Gnome said that the Jedi are threats to the balance and peace of the galaxy. Their existence alone has caused groups like the Nile to rise up and cause the death of countless citizens. And over time, Gnome would convince enough people in the Senate that the Jedi do not belong in the Republic. They're dangerous, unpredictable, and must be removed from power. So there were protests and riots outside of the temple. Jedi posted on outposts across the Outer Rim were forced back to Coruscant. And over these years, the growing division and hatred around the Jedi would cause Yoda to make decisions that would alter history. Yoda would eventually speak with Rugus Gnome, now one of the richest men in the entire galaxy, and Gnome would give Yoda a proposal. The people are calling for the mass arrest of the Jedi, but Gnome would give them an alternate option. Every living Jedi, aside from Yoda and 2 other Jedi of his choosing, could undergo a massive memory wipe and have new memories placed into their minds, and they could be exiled to the island world of Shihes, a world rich in food, water, kyber, and they will be allowed to live peacefully in exile, never to be seen again by the outside world. Yoda would meditate on this for months, and when the time came, he did what he thought was best to maintain a peaceful galaxy. He accepted, and the mind of every single living Jedi would be wiped out with a combination of a gas spraying into the temple vents, combined with a force spell from Yoda, along with Masters Yariel Poof and Apo Ramses, the 2 Jedi that Yoda chose to go undergo this mission with him. Every single member of the Jedi Order would fall unconscious, and when they woke up, they were inside of a temple on Shihes that was built up in secret over the years. Yoda understood that this choice would stay in him forever. He saw only endings in the paths laid out before him. The mass arrest of Jedi Knights dragged through the streets of Coruscant, executions that would fracture the Jedi and the Republic beyond repair, or a desperate war fought by a Jedi Order that was already hated and feared. Yoda knew that, with the galaxy against the Jedi, he risked so many Jedi falling to the dark side. He thought the Sith Order could have been reborn if he did not comply. By erasing the Jedi knowledge of the galaxy, Yoda believed he could remove the symbol that had drawn such fury. The Force itself had resisted, but Yoda did it anyway. The memories were buried, folded deep beneath new lives that felt honest and complete. And on Shihes, the Jedi awoke, no longer as exiles. They were taught here that the sea, the stone, the kyber around them were the entirety of existence. And for all of these Jedi, life would soon be normal. None of them knew of a wider galaxy outside of the island world. None of them knew of the Sith, the Republic, the Outer Rim, the history of their order. They all woke up with foggy memories, and the 3 Jedi, Yoda, Yariel, and Apo, would tell them that something unexplainable had happened. But this was their home. This was the only planet in the galaxy. And for 100 years, Yoda, Yariel, and Apo would watch over these exiled Jedi as they adapted to a new life. Of course, one major change would come to the Order. Attachment could no longer be forbidden. The Order had been exiled, not set for extinction, and so Although it was impossible and a complete foreign thought to leave the planet, the Jedi Order would not die out. It would stagnate, becoming its own thing, separate from the rest of the galaxy. And so 100 years went by. When the Jedi first awoke on the island, the great archives had been burned away on Coruscant for a cheering audience led by Nome. And with the Jedi gone, Nome would work his way into the role of Chancellor, slowly unraveling to the people behind the scenes that he is a Sith Lord, and Higo Damask would be his ally within the banking clan. Without the Jedi, a darkness that Yoda feared would begin to take root anyway. And on Shihes, the Jedi were told the old records had been destroyed long before their time. Alternate history texts were provided instead with simple, almost mythic accounts of the world. They spoke of Shihes as the only place that had ever existed, surrounded by endless, hostile nothingness. Beyond the sky, the book said, were monsters in space, among realms where life could not survive. There were stories about ancient Jedi who tried to leave the island and died instantly. The lesson was clear. Curiosity beyond this world leads to death. And as decades passed by, the original Jedi grew old and faded away. Yoda, Yarael Poof, and Aborensis remained unchanged as the three heads of the council. They led with gentle redirection, and when younger Jedi would ask about strange dreams, visions of other worlds, they were told that the Force could create illusions born of imbalance or fear. Some feelings, they said, were echoes of ancient mistakes, not memories. And over time, the Order learned to mistrust its own curiosity, to file away those sensations as spiritual noise rather than questions that were worth pursuing. Meditation would evolve, as Jedi were encouraged to root themselves physically to the world. The Force beyond the island would sometimes press in at them anyway, manifesting as sudden grief, flashes of violence, a distant sense of urgency without a source. These sensations would be acknowledged, but never explored. Daily life would reinforce this narrative. Food was grown locally, fishing villages would thrive along the coast, and no technology more advanced than what the island required would ever be developed. Starships were completely absent. Kyber crystals were plentiful beneath the island, and they would be used to create lightsabers. Stories would circulate of an age when Jedi wielded such weapons recklessly and brought ruin upon themselves. And as new generations were born, something uncanny began to take shape. Names and beings that would have been born in random worlds of the main galaxy began to be born here instead, as if the Force was willing for them to be created. Among them were Plo Koon and Dooku. What no one noticed, or perhaps no one allowed themselves to notice, was how often these children felt the pull of something beyond Shihes more strongly than others. Yoda was the only one to really see it, and he would personally train Dooku, trying to rid him of his explorative nature. And near the end of the Century of Exile, Dooku completed his Jedi Knight trials, and on the night he was named a Jedi Knight, at 25 years old, he would walk alone to the cliffs, where the land fell away into endless ocean. The wind was whipping at his robes as he sat at the edge of it, staring into the dark. As he meditated, the Force around him felt far too vast for the island's teachings to contain. And as Dooku looked to the stars, something began to happen. A new star appeared in the sky, but it was different. It seemed to be moving along a structured path, and it was blinking. This was when everything really started to take shape for the young Dooku. And over many months, Dooku would return to this exact spot every single night, noticing the same thing. Every 3 nights, a blinking star would emerge in the night sky, and it would follow the exact same path. It were almost as if this planet that they were on was being watched, monitored, scanned by something off-world. But that was impossible, right? Dooku kept all of this to himself. Deep down, he feared what could happen if he revealed to Yoda that he knew the truth. And Dooku didn't have many friends, but among his friends was Plo Koon. In this exiled Order of Jedi, Plo was born after Dooku by about 5 years. He was still a Jedi Padawan, but the two of them grew up together, and Dooku's recklessness blended well with Plo's compassion and balance. And one day, while hunting for some food deep in the island, Plo Koon would stumble upon a 100-year-old cave, hidden away for so long. Inside of this cave was a starship, unlike anything Plo could have ever imagined. And Plo would tell his good friend Dooku about this, asking if they should go to the Jedi Council. Dooku would smile to Plo, and he would ask his friend if he'd like to come with him on an adventure. Dooku would tell Plo about his months of research on the mysterious star above the planet. Plo would ask Dooku if he's going to go without him, even if he says no. And Dooku was already boarding the starship, saying it'll be just like flying a speeder that they use to explore the islands. Plo Koon looked over to the distant island temple, then cursed under his breath, and they got aboard the starship, not wanting Dooku to do something stupid alone. He told Dooku they will go to space, they will see this star that Dooku's been talking about, and they will report back to the council immediately. Dooku took the controls, blasted off, and slid across the forest floor, then fell right off the cliff ledge. Both he and Dooku were screaming, as Dooku barely pulled up in time, missing the water, flying straight up, getting a quick grip on the controls. The two of them looked to each other with fear and excitement. The feeling was unlike anything they'd ever experienced, and Dooku had managed to fly the ship to space without the Jedi ever noticing that their only emergency starship was found after 100 years. And in space, they would wait until it emerged. It was a massive ship with all sorts of satellites and recon technology that would appear and begin scanning the world, making sure the Jedi were still here. This ship has been on rotation for 100 years, appearing every 3 days just to scan the island world. There were no life forms on board, and by this point, barely anyone on Coruscant paid any attention to the scanner anymore. Nothing was ever different about them, so when a tiny blip appeared on the scanners to indicate some interference, no one noticed. And despite Plo's protests, Dooku locked his starship to the recon ship's hull, and when the recon ship jumped to hyperspace, Dooku and Plo were going with it. Plo told Dooku that they're going to die, but Dooku shook his head, saying this is the first time they'll truly ever actually live. And so a new life of exploration would begin. Dooku and Plo Koon decided it was their destiny to learn the truth of everything, and they would live like ghosts inside of a galaxy that had forgotten all about them. When they entered this galaxy, the truth would come in waves of awe and horror. Worlds were stacked atop worlds, thousands of them. Hyperlanes were alive with endless traffic, and everywhere, beneath the surface, the Force was full of darkness and fear. They learned quickly to hide who they were, cloaking their presence in the Force as pilgrims, scholars, mercenaries, really as anything but Jedi, and piece by piece the past would reveal itself in old history texts, conversations with many people. They would see what the Jedi had once been, keepers of the peace, mediators, explorers, and they learned how the Republic had fractured after the fall of Starlight Beacon, how fear had been weaponized by their ancient enemy. The Sith had not risen through war, but through patience and fear. Darth Tenebrous and his apprentice had presented themselves as saviors, stabilizers, brilliant minds offering order after chaos, co-chancellors. The Jedi had left a vacuum for the Sith to create an empire. Dooku would read transcripts of Senate debates, blaming the Jedi for every collapse that followed their removal. Plo would learn that Force sensitives discovered in this galaxy were forced to hide it away, or face arrest for being like the Jedi. And they would learn that it was Yoda who chose this path for the Jedi. Dooku felt the weight of it settle into his chest, heavy, dark, cold, and Plo, more empathetic, felt the suffering of trillions, and he struggled to contain it. They saw prisons where Force-sensitive children were taken to be reconditioned. They saw senators smiling as they got richer in a system so vast that resistance was hopeless. More than once, Dooku had to stop himself from igniting his blade and attacking the Sith Lords. They were forced to be patient. They found senators who still believed in the older ways from before their lives, and in quiet meetings, Dooku told them of Shihess, of the Exiled Order, and Dooku explained how the Jedi could have countered the Sith's rise. Some listened, many didn't, a few were terrified. So, Dooku and Plo knew that they must show that the Jedi are capable of restoring light to this galaxy. In the final months of their 3 years here, Dooku and Plo traced Tenebris's movements, his guards, his rhythms. They learned that his throne was in the old Jedi temple here on Coruscant. It made Dooku so angry to see what Yoda did. He thought he made the only move to save the peaceful galaxy, but he was wrong. He was a liar, and Dooku would vow to himself that he will force him to step down when he returns to Shihess. And on this final day, the temple would be quiet. Darth Tenebris entered the throne room alone, his arrogance hiding from him the truth of what could occur here today. As he took his seat, the doorway opened in front of him, and Jedi Master Plo Koon would ignite his blade. Tenebris was amused. A rogue being, likely from the Outer Rim, who thought he could take him on? How amusing. So Tenebris would reach out, pulling Plo to him with the Force. But it was all merely a distraction. Tenebrous would tell the guards to cuff this man and have him prepared for a public execution. The guards began to move, but one of them was secretly in disguise. Dooku, dressed in red armor, would get behind Tenebrous's throne, and he would plunge his lightsaber right through it, carving through Tenebrous's spine, killing the Sith Lord. Dooku would remove his helmet and throw Plo his lightsaber as the guards closed in, and around a half hour later, Co-Chancellor Hago Damask would run into the throne room with Senate guards behind him, only to find Tenebrous and his guards all laying dead on the floor. Damask would pretend to be sad and panicked, but when he was alone, the real persona of Darth Plagueis would emerge. For far too long, Plagueis has been under Tenebrous, thinking he's grown arrogant and weak, and he knew it was only a matter of time until the Jedi emerged again. So, he waited. He was the one who secretly made sure that the recon ship over Shihes got close enough for someone to see it, and now with the Jedi assassinating Tenebrous, he would be the one to take control of this empire and do what Tenebrous could not. Exile would be futile for the Jedi. He knew they must be exterminated. And just hours after the assassination of Emperor Tenebrous, Dooku and Plo would return to Shihes. Plo objected to this, saying they could be followed or tracked, but Dooku said it's time they return. The galaxy will be too focused on the Emperor's death. They will have a few days before any sort of retaliation comes their way, and the Jedi Order deserves the truth. And so, on Shihes, the Council trio of Yoda, Oppo Rensis, and Yarael Poof would be alerted to some sort of ship emerging from the sky. The trio knew what this was. 3 years ago, when Dooku and Plo disappeared, the Council would tell the Jedi Temple that they were involved in a speeder accident deep in the forest, where they crashed into the water and were never found. But Yoda knew that his former Padawan had escaped the world, and Yoda assumed he would be captured or killed. And yet here he was. Dooku and Plo would just land outside of the island temple, and they would quickly march into the temple comms room, where they could turn on the intercom system around the temple and speak to every single Jedi. Dooku's voice would carry across the island temple. He told them the truth of the galaxy beyond their world, a republic hollowed out and reshaped into a Sith empire. He spoke of worlds regulated instead of protected, of Force-sensitive children taken by the Empire, senators who'd given up hope. The Sith had not conquered through war, he said, but through patience and failure of the Jedi. And he would reveal that the archives were burned. This world was a cage of lies. And then Dooku said that whether the Council had been deceived or had agreed to this bargain, it no longer mattered. The outcome was the same. Billions suffered, while the Order farmed, meditated, and trained in isolation. He called on the Jedi Order to reclaim that purpose as guardians, who no longer hid from consequence, and he would call for the immediate removal of Yoda, Yarael, and Oppo Rensis from their council posts, to stand trial for abandonment of the galaxy. The transmission would end, and in the council tower, Yoda, Oppo, and Yarael faced each other. Yoda saw now that he's failed. The Sith deceived him into exile, and it was time he stepped down. But before he could make a move, the Jedi Council room would turn dark from the shadows. The Shihes sun was suddenly blocked out as a large Imperial Sith ship just emerged from hyperspace and made its way into the world while Dooku was speaking. And as Yoda turned to face the ship, its cannons didn't hesitate. The Jedi Council tower would erupt, with the 3 council leaders inside, all of them dying instantly. And from deep inside of the temple, Dooku quickly got to work, calling for the activation of the temple shields. And so the shields would be activated. Plo Koon would turn to Dooku in a panic, and he asked Dooku if he knew they were being followed. Did he want this? Dooku didn't answer. He just told Plo that the time to fight back is upon them. And from the bridge of the Sith ship, Darth Plagueis would order for the temple to be destroyed, but the shields worked to protect the temple. So Plagueis responded with escalation. From his capital ship, hangar bays would open, spilling out waves of Sith starfighters into the sky, while massive transport carriers plunged toward the island, releasing endless ranks of black-armored Sith droids that were used to enforce the Empire across the galaxy. They landed across the island jungles and coastlines, weapons firing at Jedi who were standing their ground. Inside the temple, alarms echoed through the halls as Dooku and Plo moved fast, rallying the Order as fast as they could. 5,000 Jedi of children, healers, farmers, scholars, elders, they were all rushed into the underground sanctuaries, sealed behind blast doors in the rocky caves here. The remaining 5,000 would ignite their blades, forming ranks across temple stairs, beaches, and forests. For the first time in a century, the Jedi were ready for a fight. The battle was chaotic and brutal. Droids were pouring forward in perfect lines. Blaster fire was lighting the trees as Jedi cut them down, pushed them back, or were overwhelmed beneath the numbers. The forest was on fire. Knights fought beside their siblings and their parents. The Force was binding them together as the sky burned with starfighter fire. The Sith crafts were exploding from Jedi using the Force. But as the fight went on, it felt hopeless for the Jedi. The droids were never ending. But Dooku waited. He'd made a gamble, and he would soon breathe a sigh of relief as hyperspace ruptures began to appear, with new ships dropping out one after another. Old Republic cruisers converted Senate transports with cannons. Civilian ships were here, fleets assembled from Dooku's allies that he made in his years in the galaxy, people that he asked to follow Plagueis here, because Dooku did indeed expect this attack. They would hit the Sith formation hard, catching it by surprise. Inexperienced but gritty starfighters were fighting with the Sith interceptors piloted by droids in dogfights. Turbo lasers from the new arrivals would tear into the main ship, forcing Plagueis to begin evacuation. On the ground, the Jedi felt hope spread through the Force. Dooku stood at the temple gates, watching allied ships dive toward the Sith capital vessel as boarding teams prepared to launch. Many Jedi fell, but many more would rush to the droids, taking the fight to them head-on as militia soldiers landed to fight by their side. And Dooku would see Plagueis' personal starship eject from the capital ship hangar. Dooku would order all firepower to focus on it, and Plagueis' ship was sent spiraling to the ground. Dooku would march towards it, preparing for a duel with the Sith Lord. They would meet in the open, lightsabers igniting, as Plagueis would try to hide his injuries. Dooku had known the only way he would win a duel here was if Plagueis was already hurt, and there would be no mercy. Their duel was savage from the first strike. Plagueis fought with raw dominance, heavy blows meant to crush the Jedi, feeding on the destruction around them. Dooku answered with sharper movements against the shaking ground. Explosions shook the cliffside, throwing them apart as they had to regroup. Collapsing ships were raining fire on the cliffs and into the ocean. Plagueis dove deep into his power, but Dooku didn't retreat. He was at his prime age, and he fought through the noise, through the heat, through the weight of everything the Sith and Jedi had stolen from the galaxy. A huge explosion would make the air crack as the Sith capital ship finally exploded. It caused an orange hue to surround them before heavy black smoke was upon them. The world around them was blinded by the smoke. Plagueis struck out wildly, confident that the dark power was on his side. But Dooku was patient. He waited until he saw the opening in the darkness. He stepped inside Plagueis' swing, turning the Sith strength against him, and drove his blade forward into Plagueis' chest. Plagueis stumbled, falling backwards, swallowed by smoke and flame that was on top of the endless ocean below. And Dooku stood on the edge, watching as the Sith fleet was ripped apart. He did what he thought was the only choice, and he was prepared to live with the consequences, as the Jedi would return to the galaxy. With Darth Plagueis and Tenebrous dead, the structure holding the Sith Empire together would collapse. The Jedi would return slowly, stepping back into a galaxy that no longer understood them. Dooku would take on the burden of politics, and he spoke openly of the exile, the failure, and responsibility. The Jedi did not reclaim Coruscant. They went into the Outer Rim, to worlds forgotten, ignored, or stripped for stability, and there they rebuilt places of aid. A new starlight beacon rose in deep space, bigger than the first. It was a place of trade, healing, and refuge once more, its purpose clear and transparent to all who came. This time, the Jedi stood beside it openly. The galaxy became balanced, without Sith hands guiding the worlds. The prisons holding Force sensitives were destroyed, and they were free to live as Jedi if they chose. In time, the light surfaced everywhere. Palpatine was discovered early. He became a Jedi in this new order. Same with a boy that was found on Tatooine, strong in the Force, guided by an order that didn't fear attachment or loss any longer. The Jedi were guardians, teachers, explorers, and they worked to earn the trust of the people, as the light would shine brighter than ever. And folks, that is our story for today. This initial concept idea was inspired after I watched Attack on Titan for the first time. And the story, the premise, I think the memory loss part, for sure also inspired. I don't want to spoil it if you've never seen the show, but that part also inspired by Attack on Titan. It was really tough for me because I was like, how do I exile the Jedi and, I don't know, make a fun story out of it? How do I get thousands of Jedi to get on board with just being sent away. And like, I could have done a Civil War style video, but I've done that. I wanted to really explore this, explore the morality of Yoda, just being tricked by the Sith early, and like seeing a galaxy so against them that he's like, yeah, maybe the galaxy doesn't need the Jedi anymore, and he takes them away, wipes the memories with a spell in the Force. Could have explored that a little bit more, but I don't know, whatever, you get the point. And yeah, Dooku ended up being the central character. I thought he fit what I was looking for the most here, so that was all of it. Appreciate you guys. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.